Hello there. This is going to be part 3 of a story, so if you haven't seen the first 2 parts yet, I highly recommend watching those first, or else this likely won't make any kind of sense to you. So without further ado, let's get back to the story. We pick up the story in Lagos. Steve, Nat, Sam, Wanda, Pietro, Ben, Gwen and Kevin pursue Crossbones. Steve freezes up at the mention of Bucky, and Rumlow attempts to blow himself up, and Wanda catches him. Gwen rushes over and uses her powers to help contain the blast. Gwen calls for Ben and he transforms into Heat Blast. He flies into the sky and absorbs the fire from the blast. Wanda, Ben and Gwen are celebrated by the people of Lagos while Steve sits there stunned. Back at the Avengers compound, the new additions to the team are congratulated for a great job in Lagos, but the party is ruined when Ross arrives to speak to them about the Sokovia Accords. Ross tells them the world is grateful for protecting them, but their free reign is something the leaders of the world can no longer tolerate. Ross presents them with footage from Bellwood when Vilgax attacked, New York, Johannesburg, Washington DC. The two sides argue their points, and Ben, Gwen and Kevin argue amongst themselves. Gwen says they have to abide by the law and sign, and Ben says they can't because they're deputized agents of the plumbers, and they need to be able to act on their behalf whenever they need to. The Accords will just conflict with that. Ben asks Kevin where he stands with this, and Kevin just looks at Ben and tells him he's never going back to prison again. Steve leaves as he gets the call about Peggy's death. He attends the funeral as Nat attends the meeting in Vienna. The building explodes and the international manhunt for Bucky begins. Steve tracks him down in Romania, but they're pursued by law enforcement and Black Panther. The chase ensues and ends with Steve, Bucky and Sam being arrested by Rhodey. Steve speaks to Nat in Berlin and asks who's signed the Accords so far, and she tells him herself, Tony, Rhodey, Gwen and Kevin have signed the Accords, with Clint being retired. Zemo impersonates a psychiatrist to trigger Bucky's programming, and Bucky goes on a rampage and attempts to escape. Steve captures Bucky and he remembers who Steve is. Bucky tells Steve and Sam about the other Winter Soldiers and Zemo. Steve assembles his team to help him, comprising of himself, Sam, Bucky, Wanda, Clint, Pietro, Ben, and a newly recruited Ant-Man. Meanwhile, Tony has recruited Spider-Man and Black Panther, with Bruce refusing to take either side in this conflict. The teams gear up and head to the airport. The teams fight, with Ben transforming into Water Hazard, and then everyone pairs off. Steve fights Tony, Natasha fights Clint, Ben fights Kevin, Gwen fights Wanda, Black Panther fights Pietro, Rhodey fights Scott, while Sam attempts to get Bucky to the Quinjet, but is intercepted by Spider-Man. Spider-Man calls out over the comms he needs help with Winter Soldier and Falcon, and T'Challa attempts to run off but is tackled by Pietro. T'Challa loses his temper and breaks Pietro's leg, and T'Challa runs off. The battle becomes chaotic. T'Challa dives on Bucky, and Bucky tries to plead with T'Challa, telling him he didn't kill his father, and T'Challa asks why he ran. Sam attempts to help Bucky, but Spider-Man pulls him down with webs. T'Challa attempts to land a killing blow on Bucky when Steve rams him with his shield. Meanwhile, Scott has switched to attacking Iron Man by disconnecting his circuits, but Tony dispels him from the system. Ben knocks Kevin back towards T'Challa, and Kevin absorbs his suit. Kevin then rushes Ben and knocks him back into a plane. Kevin attacks Ben with a lot more speed and agility, and yet more power, and Ben is forced to stop taking it easy on Kevin. He attempts to transform into Armadillo and hit Kevin with a drilling punch, but Kevin absorbs the vibrations and then redistributes it when he punches Ben and he flies backwards. Ben changes up his strategy again and transforms into Big Chill. He freezes Kevin and then flies over to help his teammates that are now being overrun. Clint knocks Tony down and tells Steve that they need to get out of there because the rest of them aren't. Scott says he's got an idea for a distraction and grows big. Ben flies over and freezes T'Challa and he immediately breaks out. Ben transforms into Diamond Head and begins building a wall of diamonds in front of Steve and Bucky to ensure their escape. T'Challa runs over to stop him, but Natasha stuns him, and Ben is able to complete his wall. Scott passes out and Ben transforms into Jet Ray to help Sam stop Tony and Rhodey from pursuing them. Ben overtakes them and turns around to blast them. Sam catches up and latches onto Tony's back and throws him back towards the ground, and Ben does the same with War Machine. Ben loses power after so many quick changes, and Tony decides to give up on the pursuit to catch Ben from falling. Wanda, Pietro and Sam and Clint read the room and surrender. Tony investigates and realizes what Steve said about Zemo was true, and visits Sam to find their location before leaving to help them, with T'Challa in pursuit. The rest of the film plays out the same, with Tony finding out the truth and attempting to kill Bucky, but is stopped by Steve, and the relationship is ruined. Steve and Nat break Sam, Wanda, Ben and Pietro out of prison, with Clint and Scott taking plea deals. This is the end of part 3. Let me know if you want to see part 4 going into Ragnarok, Infinity War and finally Endgame. Thank you very much for watching, guys. Stay tuned for my review of Loki episode 3. But that's all for now, guys. Bye.